Hey, what's up, stock compounders? Brad here. So Mohnish Pabrai released his latest Q&A on his YouTube channel, June 15th. It was with Radhika Gupta, and I want to share my highlights from this Q&A. You know, I love whenever Mohnish puts out a Q&A. He's my favorite teacher around stock market investing, and there's always so many nuggets. So let's dive right in. I just want to share I've got like 8 highlights I want to share from this Q&A. So the first one, he was asked something about, you know, what do you attribute your success to, right? Your success in life. And he said something interesting, and he's talked about this in a past talk. I think it was a guest lecture at a business school, and how, you know, everyone has an inner map, okay? And this inner map, kind of like how we operate, is pretty well established by the age of 5 years old. Okay. Now I'd say most adults, the vast majority of adults, have misalignment between their inner map and kind of their outer experience of the world, how they conduct their lives. All right. So you've got the inner map that's like this. And when it's misaligned, you know, there's all of these hurdles that prevent you from kind of achieving your best life, okay? But when you can orient kind of the inner map to how you live your life, you can really turbocharge your success and how far you can go in your life, how successful you are, what you can achieve, and really just whatever metrics are important to you in life. Obviously, we don't all have the same yardstick for what it looks like to have a successful and happy life. So that was the first one. I found that very interesting. Point 2, he talks about Dando, right? What is Dando? And essentially what Dando is, it's an approach. So Mohnish Pabrai, one of his books, a very popular book that he wrote, at least popular in the value investing community, is called the Dando investor. And you know, the saying for the Dando investor is, heads I win, tails I don't lose much. And the whole idea with Dando is it's an approach to doing business where you leave yourself all kinds of upside, but you really minimize your downside, okay? And it's just a fantastic way to approach business in general. So, you know, in terms of Dando, for Mohnish, looking at investment opportunities, the first question he asks himself when sizing up a potential investment is, how would I lose money on this investment? Okay. And it reminds me of Jack Dorsey when he was starting Twitter. He came up with a list of 200 some reasons that Twitter would fail, okay? Because when you become an expert on kind of where the failures are, you can gauge whether or not it's a good idea to go into that business. And the same is true for Mohnish. He looks, what are the ways that things can go wrong with this investment? How am I going to lose money on this investment? And he says, if you focus on the downside and, you know, you get to an investment, a prospect crosses your desk where you have a really hard time finding ways that you're going to lose money on that investment. When that's true, the upside largely takes care of itself. And, you know, it's not necessarily a very sexy way of investing. But, you know, when I think of most investors who they're looking for a story where the stock can go to the moon, right? Take Tesla, for example. Take Nikola, which is a company I looked at recently and did a video on. These companies, clearly they could go to the moon, right? It's easy to buy into that story. But if you look at those businesses from the perspective of, all right, how can I lose money here? you're going to find all kinds of ways that you can lose money on those businesses. So, Pabrai's whole approach is find opportunities where my risk of losing money is very low. The probability of a future outcome where I lose money is very low. That's the whole thing with Dando. And it's true, it's not very sexy. But when you get into the sexy space of investing, you're really more in a gambling space where there's a story for the company and you really want to believe that story, and you kind of forget about all the ways that you could lose money on that investment. So I really like that approach from Mohnish. My third highlight, so Pabrai, after the 2008 financial crisis, he became a student of failures from other great value investors. Okay, so he essentially hired a team of interns to research, what are all of the different investments that great value investors lost money on, and then could it have been identified before they invested in that company that the company had a high probability of losing money? Could that have been spotted beforehand? And so he found all of these different areas to look at for red flags for these investments. What could have been spotted? And the biggest area of these red flags was leverage. Okay, more than any other reason, when a great investor bought a company that was highly leveraged, that was the biggest cause of investment failure. Okay, so Pabrai tries to avoid levered financial institutions. He had one in 2008 that went to zero, and he had another that went very close to zero. So it's the number one reason why value investors lose money: leverage. And leverage is really most often born out of impatience, right? You want to grow faster than is natural for the business to grow. So you borrow a bunch of money to juice the growth, and that can get people into big trouble. Highlight number 4. So here Pabrai is talking about 10 to 20 years from now, how are we going to look back at this pandemic? How did the leaders respond to this pandemic? And he thinks, we're going to look back at those leadership decisions as pretty poor decisions. And what he's really pointing at here is when you take away jobs from 35 million people, when you basically shut down the economy, there's all of these effects of that weren't fully considered, right? Of course, we're saving lives by shutting down the economy, but what are the downsides of shutting down the economy, and how do those downsides compare to the benefit of the lives saved? And he points to, when you take away all these jobs, you get suicide rates that go up, you get depression rates that go up, you get domestic abuse, you have divorce rates, you have all of these side effects of kind of shutting down the economy and making these jobs go away. So he doesn't think there was really a proper analysis that was done where kind of both sides were effectively weighed. He thinks we overacted on shutting things down. So that's, he said it's not going to be a popular position, but it's interesting. As a guy, as an investor, as a thinker that I really respect, it's interesting to hear him say that. And he also says businesses are fragile creations. So when you take away even a couple weeks of revenue from businesses, there's just going to be a lot of them that can't make it. There's going to be a lot of businesses that aren't going to be able to reopen when, the local governments say, okay, everyone can reopen now. That's just not going to be an option for a lot of businesses. So he he thinks we have created serious permanent damage to the global economy by how we've responded to this pandemic. So there that is. Highlight number 5. He says the U.S. markets have brushed off COVID as a non-event. And here he's talking about how you have the economy doing one thing, which is pretty bleak right now in terms of unemployment. And then you've got the stock market, particularly, that doesn't seem impacted by what's happening in the economy. So, he doesn't think the markets are pricing in very much bad news at all to stock prices. He doesn't believe the markets have accurately discounted the realities of this pandemic, the economic realities of this pandemic. He didn't really go into why. That would just be speculation, of course. But he's seeing that he thinks the stock market is elevated in a way that's not justifiable by what's happening in the economy. So, anyway, point number 6. He was asked, how do you practice patience during a pandemic like this when there's so much happening? And really how Pabrai maintains equanimity or patience, kind of a long-term investment horizon, is by reminding himself to keep things in perspective. And there's an Indian saying that says, if wealth is lost, nothing is lost. If health is lost, something is lost. If character is lost, everything is lost. So, as long as you're able to put food on the table and you have a roof over your head, money, it's just not, he doesn't think it should be like the focus of someone's life, right? Especially if, you're living fairly comfortably already. Keep it in perspective. Take it one step at a time. And, wait until the compelling investment opportunities come to you. There's no need to run out there and try to create an investment opportunity where one doesn't actually exist. Okay, and I see a lot of people doing that on Robinhood. Every Friday I put out a video about what Robinhood investors are doing. And there's just so much throwing money at these long shot opportunities. So it's a good reminder to keep things into perspective. Point number 7, he's asked, what does success mean to you now, having achieved so much? So he gives a few different answers to this. On a day-to-day basis, he likes to ask himself, am I leading an aligned life, right? You've got the kind of the inner map and the outer map. And just to check in with himself, he's successful if he feels like he's in alignment. So he also likes to play math games, right? Bridge, blackjack. He was banned from playing blackjack at a casino recently in Vegas. Stocks and Dakshana Foundation, which is his kind of nonprofit. There's a lot of math games to play in that. So he likes that. If he's doing those things, he considers himself successful because that's what's fun for him. And then he pointed to the last one, which is legacy. How many people are going to show up to his funeral? So that's kind of how Pabrai defines success. And then just a little sound bite here that I thought was interesting. He was talking about capitalism. He's actually reading a book about capitalism that I'll get to in a moment. But he says capitalism is a great system for overall wealth creation. Okay, it's not a great system for balanced wealth creation. So there's always going to be this disparity between the haves and the have-nots when you have a capitalist system. And of course, it's important for government, it's important for, nonprofit institutions, other institutions to, try to buoy the ones that are left behind. But that's part of the nature of capitalism. One of the focus of capitalism is to increase the overall wealth creation. And then he gave 2 book recommendations, which I thought was awesome. One is from Charlie Munger, and it's called Capitalism in America by Alan Greenspan. And I actually just downloaded that on Audible, so I'll be checking that out. I'll let you guys know what I think of that. And then the second one is from Li Lu. Li Lu manages money for Charlie Munger, runs a fund called Himalayan Capital Management, I believe. And Li Lu's book was The Other Half of Macroeconomics by Ku. And that's really about, back in 2008, there was all this quantitative easing. They were basically dropping money from helicopters. And why is it that inflation didn't just take off? Why didn't we enter an age of hyperinflation? And that's kind of covered in this book, The Other Half of Macroeconomics. So I'm really curious about that as well. So that's it, guys. I just wanted to share my highlights from this latest Mohnish Pabrai Q&A interview. Yeah, I love it. I will link to it in the description if you want to watch the full thing. It's 59 minutes in length. And I couldn't cover everything. Obviously, there's some other interesting things in there. But yeah, let me know what your highlight was from this latest Q&A from Mohnish. I'd love to hear that down in the comments. All right, guys, I will see you in the next video. Take care.